Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Guerino, thank you for your interest in East Longmeadow. Let me begin by introducing our counselors. Marilyn Richards, Ralph Page, Don Anderson, I'm Kathy Hill, Mike Kane, Tom O'Connor, and Pat Henry.
How do you do? Hello.
So, again, to be repetitious, we appreciate your interest in the town of East Longmeadow and are interested in what you have to say this evening. So let me start with the leadoff question. Would you take a few minutes to tell us about your specific interest in this position and why you think you would be successful in East Longmeadow?
So, again, I want to thank everyone for having me today. I was here the last time you were looking to hire and was quite disappointed. I like this town. I have done a lot of research on this town. This is a town that is very similar to Bourne relative to budget and complexity. In reviewing minutes, and I had the opportunity again to go back to the original charter report, and was just impressed with the thoughtfulness that went into that original report that went out to the citizenry, and we read the charter. I think that I have the experience and the depth to be able to take East Longmeadow forward. You've done a great job the last 3 years, a transition from a town meeting select board to a to a town council, if you will, is not easy. And I think that the council, in reviewing minutes over the last couple of years, has done an outstanding job in making that transition. There are some things that are going on in East Longmeadow. You've opened up a new enterprise fund with your stormwater management system. You have a fairly new enterprise when it comes to your water and sewer, how that works. I'm very familiar with enterprise funds. In Bourne, we had almost a $16 million landfill enterprise fund, as well as a small sewer. Your budget is about the same. Your raise and appropriate's a little different because you receive about $6 million more in Chapter 70 than we did in Bourne, so we had to raise a little bit more. The departmental structure is the same, and I think that I can take what you have going on here. You're looking at the MSBA for a school. You're looking at perhaps expanding your police station. There are a number of things. I have good capital experience. We've built a lot of things over my tenure that I can bring a lot of, I think, institutional knowledge on how to do those things forward. Additionally, if I could, just one more quick. In Bourne, we didn't have an HR department for years. And then we did. And then because of a failed override, we didn't. A lot of those things fell onto the town administrator. And I know that there's some struggle with HR right now. You've contracted with a person. I think a town of this size and complexity really needs a full-time HR department. I can tell you from experience, I did my best, and I can do it, especially in the civil service community. But you are better to have a full-time HR department.
For clarification, you're absolutely correct. Our profile around having a HR department was similar, except for there was no debt exclusion or override. But we didn't, we sort of had, and it fell to our previous manager to wear two hats. Mm-hmm. And it was that person's intent to find the right HR person for the job, and that being, quite a challenge, it never came to fruition. But it certainly is the intent of this council to have a permanent HR individual at some point.
It's good for the employees, and it can save the city, the town, if you will, substantial amounts of money in the long run.
Thank you. We're going to pretty much do a round robin with questions. So, Mr. Anderson.
Okay. Ask all three, or just like you just one? Or?
You can do them. Just whatever's.
All right. What type of work culture would you work to create and foster in this town, and how would you go about doing it?
There needs to be mutual respect between the department leaders, the administrative support staff, the DPW staff, and the town manager's office. And how I think you create that atmosphere and create a culture of inclusion is to be open with the employees. I think if you were to look at Bourne and call any of the department leaders, you will find that I offered assistance where necessary. I did not micromanage the departments. I let those folks that know their jobs better than I do their jobs, and would offer to give them assistance when they needed assistance, bounce ideas, had a budgetary issue, and let them experiment. You need to have, I believe, as much of an open door policy with staff as possible, but certainly following the chain of command that's required. And there were times as, if you will, de facto HR person, when an employee who had difficulties with their department leader would have to come to me. And that was a hard thing for them to do because of the way the hierarchy is set. In making people feel comfortable, making them feel appreciated, and then working with, if there's a union involved, working with them during negotiations and in between negotiations on how to make the workplace better. Folks that may have 20 years in an administrative support role can offer more assistance in how that department operates than a brand new department leader. And I think you need to understand that, and I think one has to appreciate what you have in staff.
Now, in your resume, I know in the past you were an interim municipal manager, but a town administrator is different from a manager. So, whether from a practical level or conceptual level, how would you hold employees accountable to maximize their performance?
Okay, so understand that I was a full town manager and village manager as well in Rockingham, Vermont a while ago, and that was they have a strong town manager statute in Vermont. The charter in Bourne became stronger each review. So if you look at the charter in Bourne and you look at the charter for duties and responsibilities that are placed on the town manager here in East Longmeadow, it's very similar. To get to the question, the council will set up goals for the year, external and long-term and important goals. My job is to express those goals to the employees and to the department leaders and how we're going to accomplish what the council has set forward for us to do. Additionally, there are internal goals that I'm going to have for each of the departments that may be in consort or they may be different than what happens with the council. And we measure that. We say, what are the 3 or 4 things that we need to do? Short-term, mid-term, long-term. Sometimes there's hiccups. Sometimes something comes up, a bad storm will come up or something on DPW that throws things off. But you look at those and you meet periodically. I don't think you should have to meet with your department leaders, every day or sometimes even every week. But you meet with them and you ask how we're doing with this. How are we doing with that? What's the impediment? What can I do to help you? Do you need external assistance? We're not perfect and we don't know everything about everything. So, and then at the end of the year, you look at those and you see where they are. Good job, needs improvement. Let's see what we can do to get this going because this is important. We kind of fell short on the council on this. And you try to set it up for the next year. And then you have a track record. Some departments you'll have to review every year. Some towns, I know in the town of Situate, as an example, if they did a good job in their review, you may be able to do it every 2 years. It depends on the individual and it depends on the capacity in each department.
I think you answered my next question within that question, so I will defer to Tom.
This is regarding finance. Could you please describe your role in financial planning in your past positions, including developing the budget capital improvement plans and ensuring financial stability for the community?
I will try to make this short, but there's a lot to that question. When I came to Bourne, the first email I received from the finance director was, oh, by the way, we're $1.5 million upside down in X. We were short in free cash, we were short in stabilization. I notice your total free cash and stabilization is right about 9%, 4.6% and 3.96% respectively in FY20. That needs to come up a little bit, and I will get to that in a second. We put together with the finance committee and the select board, because it was a town, some really stringent financial policies. And we lived by those policies: a free cash policy, a stabilization policy, a capital stabilization policy, an OPEB policy. And if we faltered on those policies, we had to have and I would suggest this is an idea to look at, a plan to make it right, because your bonding agencies look at if you are adhering to policies that you have set up. So I would look at your policies, I would see where there may be needs. I would work closely with the treasurer and the finance director to be sure that we're all in line with that. What's our bonding? Your bond rating is similar to Bourne's. It's a AA plus and a AA. I would look at all those things and see if things needed to be tweaked. I'd bring it to the council. I'd ask for your help and support on that, and move forward. Now, the budgeting system, the way I budgeted, was we would start just about as soon as free cash was certified for the next year. We would get together. I would know what the goals of the select board were at the time, because they had goals in May. And we would put that forward. What are we looking at for staffing? What are we looking at for capital? We had a great capital plan in that, and I will say it, I said it at the last interview 3 years ago. I'm fortunate. I had a wizard as a finance committee chair. She was fantastic, still is. And we were really able to put together a good capital plan with a number of people's assistance. I worked with the school department. I would meet with the superintendent. We also had a working group that fell away a couple of years ago, but we had school committee representatives, select board representatives, the superintendent, myself, and the finance director. We'd meet monthly just to have a chat, just to see where things were. The budget comes in to us. I know your budget is due in June. The budget would have to be ready for town meeting prior. So we would start the budget formally at the beginning of November. I would meet with the department heads individually. The finance department inserted the numbers. They did all the salary schedules and all of those types of things. I would look at it, see where we were, see what our cash position was, see what the priorities of the board were, try to meet those as much as possible. And we would meet again with the department leaders. I would put together a presentation a preliminary presentation for the board and the finance committee. And then we would move forward. The budget message was in January. At that time, my budget was handed over to the select board. They had a couple of weeks to review it. And then they would meet jointly with the finance committee. So when the department leaders came in to talk about their budgets, everyone was hearing the same information at the same time. And that's key. It's critical that everyone gets the same information at the same time. And that's in finance, and that's in other things as well.
There's a second part to this question, which is, what is your experience with financial forecasting?
We would go back and forward. We had a good long-term comprehensive plan as it looked toward financing. You can put in 2% or 3%. We would have spreadsheets that would allow variability for those types of things. 5 years on a municipality can be 2 financial lives, depending what happens with the economy. But we would put a 5-year plan forward. We would try to extrapolate that out farther, but it really didn't make much sense beyond 5 years because state aid changes, lots of things change. But we would look at our debt load. We would look what's coming off the debt. What are we going to be able to do for capital to keep things kind of stable? And we would project employment needs. We would project school needs. You know, there was a new school opening up. Now we don't have any idea really what the utilities are going to be on that new school. We know it's energy efficient, but we know it's twice the size. So, you know, we have to try to play for those things. A new police station. We did a lot of capital projects. So we would, and I would work with the finance department. I would work with our Unibank, our bonding person, on where we were. We would look at our health insurance trends. We were self-insured, so we had to be really careful what we did with the health insurance trends on that. And holistically look at the budget. And then we'd have to look at the landfill kind of as a separate critter, if you will, because it was such a big organization, and the contracts were really important on how we did that moving out.
There's a final part of this question, which is, what's your philosophy on dealing with OPEC, which is the elephant in the room for all communities in Massachusetts, and it continues to grow and not get better? Okay.
So my personal opinion isn't really relevant on OPEB. I think it's something that we need to do. That's the bottom line. You need to do it. We established an OPEB policy in Bourne. We set up a separate board of trustees, if you will, for that policy. We utilized, if our free cash was in excess of policy, we would take a percentage of that excess and put it to OPEB, as well as an appropriation on an annualized basis. We had about I'm going to say 30 or 60 million, and I'm sorry, outstanding liability on that. And we had put together, we put probably about 4 million in the bank as of now, but we just started it about 3 years ago. You have to do it. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense in the long run, but it has to be done.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the next question, Tom, and it speaks to human resource systems as well as collective bargaining. A very important part of being the East Longmeadow town manager is managing the HR system. Are you familiar with the situation with the HR, East Longmeadow's HR system?
In as much as I discussed it a little earlier, yes, in any great detail as it relates to specific employees, it would be inappropriate for me to know any of that. So I can't say yes to that. I am aware of difficulties in that area. I am seasoned in that area. I have made mistakes in that area over time, and that has taught me very well. I have done some other things well, but certainly HR is a specialty that you really need to have somebody good at. HR in the private sector and HR in the municipal world are very different animals, especially when you have civil service, and you're a civil service community, when you have collective bargaining issues and those types of things. So I'm aware of it. I think that I have the wherewithal to deal with it. I've had some really tough HR issues come before me, and there's not a lot that can jostle me, if you will, these days.
Good, thank you. What has been your experience in building and managing an HR system and processes? And then related to HR, one of the key responsibility of the manager is the collective bargaining responsibilities. What has been your experience in this area, and how have you, or do you see this responsibility being executed?
So for HR systems, we were just starting to get the HR system up and running when we didn't get the override, as I explained earlier, and we said, if the override doesn't pass, X is going to happen. It didn't pass, and you have to, if you tell the citizenry something that's going to happen, you can't bluff. And X happened, and it needed to happen. So before that, we were able to put in systems that had we never had an employee's handbook that took over some things where collective bargaining agreements were silent. So we put that together. That went away and it came back to the town manager, the town administrator, we kind of separated things off. Workers' compensation and those types of things, FMLA, stayed within my office specifically, and I had a really seasoned employee that was able to do that. Health insurance and those types of things went over to treasurer, but they will be, I think, putting together a new HR department. I can build that department. I know a lot about it now, where grievances in those types of things and how that system has to work and where things go. Relative to collective bargaining, we had 8 bargaining units in Bourne. There were 4 up in Rockingham, but I was able to successfully negotiate all of the contracts without using outside counsel. We had good relationships both with LIUNA and with the police superior officers and patrol officers bargaining unit, and with a hybrid of Bourne Employees Association. We did use counsel relative to the fire department. The fire department union in Bourne has long been a difficult organization to bargain with. They're great people. They run a great EMS system, similar to what you're building your EMS system here, buying the second ambulance through a lease purchase agreement. But I did need assistance here. We would always end up at DLR, Department of Labor Relations, and have experience there, have experience with civil service appeals. But over the tenure that I had in Bourne, I had a very good relationship in collective bargaining with all of the units.
Thank you.
Okay, grant writing. Can you give us a little background on your administrative experience with grant writing and what projects have been funded through grants?
So I can go back a ways, and I can everything from community development block grants for housing early on in my career. We wrote those. We received a number of Mass Works grants in Bourne. We received an EDA grant for a new sewer plant of $2.5 million, and Mass Works to go along with that for $1.5. Was I the lead writer of those grants? Not generally. I generally had staff that were capable of doing it, and I also looked to our regional planning commission to assist in those types of things. They have that expertise. It's become a real science now to write various grants. I was involved with all of the meetings on that. I certainly helped the town of North Attleboro years ago on procuring a CDBG grant for housing and economic development. We also were designated in Bourne a enterprise zone, if you will. It's called different. It's not called that down there, but it's like an enterprise zone where we were eligible for other types of grant funding, and so it was large grants, small grants, grants for MS4 work that we were doing. We received some of that. I worked with the conservation. That's where it was in Bourne to get those. So I was not always the author, but I was always the clearinghouse.
Thank you.
My turn. Welcome.
Thank you.
The category that my question falls under is planning and economic development. East Longmeadow is interested in balancing residential neighborhoods with the need for commercial industrial, and retail investment. How would you work to encourage appropriate economic development that aligns with East Longmeadow's town character?
One of the things that intrigues me and wanted me to come back to East Longmeadow is the mix that you have and the commitment that you have to preservation of open space, farmland, while looking for a vital downtown area, if you will, or in commercial area. So there are certain things that I would look at. I would go, you're in the process of a master plan right now. I know, and I understand in capital, they're looking for 2 years to get 2 years of funding coming up to take a look at that. We just finished our, what we call it a long-term comprehensive plan, same type of thing. And there's a few things that I would do. One, I would look at your current zoning. I would work with the planning committee of the city, of the council, as well as the planning board, and take a look at your current zoning. Is there room for zone differentials? Can you do things to reuse existing facilities? Reuse is important. Height requirements may be something that you look at. Can you do mixed-use development? Those are types of things. And then I would look to your CPA on continuing preservation of various lands. I don't know if you're a right to farm community. I didn't get quite into that area, that deep into the weeds. But those are types of things that you can look at. I had the opportunity today, and I was here last week as well, just tooling around, to take a look at your housing stock and look at all of those types of things, your roads and your infrastructure that I could see. And it's very impressive. By the way, whoever your DPW does a great job on the roads.
Yeah, they do.
You should thank them every storm if it's like this, because they did a phenomenal job. It's a long-term issue. Things don't happen in 24 months. You don't get a whole new downtown or whole new economic development scheme in 24 months. We worked 10 to 14 years to get things done in Bourne, Main Street, old Main Street that went dead when the military base, when those missions went away. It took us a long time. We changed the zoning, we changed density requirements, we did mixed-use development, and now there's 3 new restaurants opening up, there's a new hotel opening up. It takes time. One of the things that I think are key is you have to have citizen input. And bringing forums, facilitated forums in, letting the citizens, they pay the bills. Let the citizens have a real good say in what they would like to see the town become. Some people won't want it to change at all. Other people will want it to become something completely different. But you're able to get those compromises and those ideas out on the table and move it into a workable plan. Your master plan is going to help with that.
Yes to all of that. With the master plan, I was at the planning board meeting last evening, and you mentioned that securing capital. That was just discussed last night. That's amazing that he knows it today, because I was going to tell everybody.
I'm sorry, did I?
No, the planning board has been trying to put together a master plan, and it's just overwhelming in terms of time commitment. So they are looking to contract out. Once a plan is in place, how do you see putting that plan forward? What do you think what are your key components to making a master plan work?
That falls on council. The council has to buy into the master plan. The council has to refer to the master plan in their goals. That's my job to implement. I can assist you, I can offer you advice. The town manager is not the 8th council member, but certainly can offer guidance if asked, and every department then says, this is the master plan. You you put it out there, you make it a part of the lexicon for what the community is doing and what you want to have done. And if a new development comes in, or if you're going to put a new street in, or how does it fit with the master plan? How does it tie in to what has been accepted as the master plan? And then again, it's going to need to be tweaked over time because times change and things change. But you keep that document as the focal point of development and community character.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, follow up on that.
Certainly.
The town of Bourne, does it currently have a master plan? And if so, how is it created and paid for?
So, in Bourne, we're in Barnstable County. Barnstable County is the last county to have a strong county government. So it is required under the county that we have a long-term comprehensive plan, is what it's called, every 10 years. We just finished the second iteration of that when I was there. The planning board really did the LCP, the master plan, this past time through. They did engage a consultant. They had several meetings. They had two facilitated meetings, as a matter of fact, as I recall. They met every other week. They had different departments come in. They had external people come in, the business community, the nonprofit community, those types of things come in and help. And they also went back to the plan they did 10 years ago to see how do we do. When we look at the different components, how did we do? Bourne is different. It has distinct villages. And how did we do in those villages? Sagamore is very different than Katam. It's very different than Bourne Village. And how did that work? And it was surprising. They checked a lot of boxes because we stuck to it. But a master plan needs generally outside expertise, just so you don't get muddled into, I like it this way, I like it that way. It's good to have a third party come in and help. And the Regional Planning Commission can help with that as well. Mm-hmm. You pay for it, you might as well utilize what you pay for.
Yep. Thank you.
Good morning, or good evening, Mr. Guerino.
Good evening. Well, it's hard to tell because of the way the daylight is now, so.
I was not on the council when you came last time, but I did review and watch the video, and I too was disappointed. My question is on delegation. Serving as town manager is a time-consuming job with a lot of responsibility. I'll have to tell you that. How and when do you delegate responsibility and authority? Are there any specific responsibilities you might consider already for delegation?
Okay. The first thing I would need to do before I can really give a good answer to that question is I would need to assess what there is for internal talent, institutional memory, in those types of things.
Very fair.
I certainly learned some things today about how you do licenses and some things like that were very interesting, that are different than what I'm used to. But I certainly would not micromanage. I'm not sure what I would delegate yet, to be perfectly honest. I don't want to fluff a question when I don't have a good answer, and I don't.
I also drew the next question. And in this one, I indicate in your, it's all about school partnership with these public schools. And I noticed in your resume, you talk about harness school spending with close collaboration with school superintendents. So I guess my question would be, have you had any experience working with a school superintendent on building a new school?
2 new schools, 2 different superintendents. When I first came to Bourne, they were in the throes of building what they called the Bournedale Elementary School. It It was very important at that time, this is 15 years ago, the educational model has since changed for Bourne, of having a school on each side of the canal, for obvious reasons. So the Bournedale Elementary School, I worked with the superintendent and the school building committee on very closely because it went down what we call scenic highway. And there's an awful lot of traffic that goes from scenic highway, from the Sagamore Bridge to the Bourne Bridge. And MassDOT really didn't want to give up because the land that we had, the town had 40-plus acres up there, did not want to slow traffic down. So it became very complicated. Easements and legislation and things that you normally wouldn't have to do in building a school. That was built on time and on budget. It took, I will say, I think it was 3 or 4 separate votes to get a yes for the override on that. It was very contentious because they kept going back. I was new at the time. The second school, the MSBA changed how they do business, and they, in my opinion, the new MSBA, which is now 5 or so years old, they are fantastic to work with. They really know their stuff. They have it down to a science, and they assist the communities in building. There was a school building committee. I was not as engaged in the second school as I was in the first because the process was so much different. I was a member. If they needed me, I would come in, but when you're going 4 nights a week and there's double meetings, you sometimes have to pick and choose which ones you're going to go to. This committee did a fabulous job, and there's a beautiful new elementary school. Well, it's not an elementary school now. They go K to 2, 3 to 5. It's a Bourne intermediate school, they call it. It's a different way of educating. So the kids are together all the way through. And I guess we paid off a school while I was there too. The middle school, which people still think is a new school, is 20 some odd years old, and we have capital issues that we have to do. But the Bournedale Elementary School, the primary school now, I was extremely involved with. And not so much on the second one, but we certainly worked with the superintendent all the way through on the funding. I had a great relationship with both superintendents.
I'm going to just jump in on both of those builds. How big the project, dollar-wise?
Oh, the Bournedale Elementary School ended up to be in the 30s. Mm-hmm. And the new school was 28 and some change when it was all said and done.
Okay.
Different type of building. It was a different construction.
Thank you.
Are you finished, Pat? Yep. Okay. Hello again. My question is under building relationships. Please describe how would you develop, manage, and increase relationships with other East Longmeadow stakeholders, elected and appointed board members, neighboring communities, state and federal officials.
So let me start backwards. Let's start at the end of that question and move it the other way. My time with the Massachusetts Rural Development Council provided me excellent education and experience in dealing with our federal and state partners. From conducting congressional briefings years ago when we were working with that, dealing with the entire delegation. The delegation has changed, certainly over time, and working at the State House. I have maintained good relationships regardless of partisan issues with the state reps that I've worked with and the state senators that I've worked with throughout my tenure. The answer to really the whole question is to be present And what I mean by that is you build relationships with the other elected boards by showing up, being available to them if they have questions, but go to their meetings not every meeting, you don't want to be intrusive, but certainly go to their meetings occasionally. Certainly at the beginning, attend all of the meetings you can. Be available, take the calls, sit with the chairs, sit with the members if they need to. Again, it goes back to what I said a little earlier. You don't gain respect without earning respect, and you have to be present. You have to be an honest broker as much as you all the time, and you work with them. Now, relative to other stakeholders in town, be it the nonprofit community or the PTO or those types of groups, again, you show up and you take the calls, you open your doors, you show up at the football game, you go to the Little League, not all the time, not every week, but you do those types of things. You have a presence. And I try to be approachable. And I think that's the key, is to be approachable and to be caring about what their mission is.
I didn't want to cut you off.
Well, I just also, if there's a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club or those types of things, although they meet awfully early in the morning, you come. You come and you make those presentations.
Another focus of building relationships throughout the community would be regionalization of services. Have you had an opportunity to share services to save money perhaps between communities?
I am so glad that question got asked today.
Well, I'm so glad you're glad.
So an example, the town of Bourne used to have its own weights and measures. Doing your gas tanks and restaurant scales and all of those types of things. And that was a full-time position, and it was a benefited position, and it was okay, it worked out okay. The town of Barnstable had a weights and measures department that was doing other towns as well. And we looked at it, and we joined in. It was all fee-based. It didn't cost the town of Bourne a nickel up until this past fiscal year, where we regionalized it, if you will. We joined in with them. And it's been a spectacular success. There's been, I think, in my 9 years that it was happening, I think there were 2 complaints. And this year, there is some capital that they have to help the town of Barnstable with, but so that's one area of regionalization. The 4 Upper Cape towns are working with the military base on regionalizing and I'm not sure where it's going to go at this point, but we've gotten together relative to wastewater on the base and divestiture that the base has to do to be BRAC-proof, base closing proof. So the 4 Upper Cape towns are working on that. We're also partnering with our neighboring town of Sandwich that was getting just pummeled with nor'easters taking a lot of their beachfront away, and that's a big deal there. Where we'll do a dredge and we'd sell them sand at cost. All they need to do is come pick it up. So there's a lot of mutual work there. Now, I did hear today when I met with the Public Works Superintendent about your arrangement with the City of Springfield on how you're charged relative to your wastewater, and how that's just a percentage based on the number of towns that I would like, if I were brought in, I'd like to meet with council and talk to them about perhaps a different way. And we'd have to work with the City of Springfield, but I think there's a better way to do that. That may be beneficial cost-wise. I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of research on it. We certainly regionalized, we worked on a regional basis. A lot of our shellfish, we kind of tied in with other communities. I know shellfishing isn't a big sport here, but it was huge in Bourne, the recreational shellfish. I know more about bivalves than I ever thought I would. And our landfill was regional as well. We brought in the town of Falmouth, as well as ash from a local incinerator. But so there's a lot of regionalization. There's a lot of opportunity for regionalization. You can certainly look at DPWs and see, does every town need a grader? Does every town need X? You know, maybe there's some co-purchasing you can do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Tom.
Mr. Kane, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Our next question, citizen relationships. I think losing town meeting, our residents expect this council to be accessible and our town manager as well. So that being said, East Longmeadow is a highly engaged community where citizens expect their local government officials to be easily accessible, as I stated. What is your approach to interacting with citizens, and what actions have you taken to improve communication with residents?
It's really hard to be, there's going to be a group of citizens that think you're the best thing since sliced bread with your accessibility, and others that will think that you just never are accessible to them and you don't care about their needs and so forth. What I do is open my door. And if I don't have the answer, I try to get the resources where they can find an answer to a problem. When people come into town hall, and I'm going to digress just for a second, they come in to pay a bill, to get a permit, to learn about what they can or can't do with their property. It's not always a positive interaction when they come in the door. And if a person comes, one of the things about culture that was asked a little earlier, if someone comes in and they go to assessors and they should be at treasurer, if they, you know, instead of the people saying, hey, just go down the hall here and they'll take care of you, one of the things we impressed upon our folks is get up out of your chair, walk that person down and say, Mrs. Jones or Mr. Henry or whatever the case may be is here about this. And can you help them out, please? That goes a long way. Other things about citizen engagement now are you need to be somewhat internet savvy, if you will. You need to be, I'm not a big Twitter fan, but you have to, you know, we did it for EMS, the police department did it. You have to have some sort of a Facebook presence or an Instagram presence. I am not one who blogs. I think my time is better spent focusing on other things. But other departments like the recreation department, the health department, they should and probably do have presence on these things. The other thing that I think you can look at, and I mentioned this in the first round, is there are now software programs out there that are very engaging for the citizens. So there's a pothole on X Street. I was trying to think of one of the streets I went down and went blank today. And there's a program called See, Click, Fix. And you can see it, you click it, it goes to DPW, and then the DPW can schedule it. You know, sometimes there's an interactive piece where you can get back to people, but that can be a real time drain on your staff. But if it's scheduled and you work out your schedules, you can get those types of things done. Having your door open when you don't have, you know, if I'm not scheduled for another meeting, I will take time on any citizen who wants to come in and talk to me about any topic. If I have a scheduled meeting, I will ask if we can set up a meeting. But if I have free time, in quotes, I will stop what I'm doing and make sure that citizen is addressed.
The last piece is, what steps would you take to become knowledgeable regarding East Longmeadow?
I think, I hope I've answered that a little bit, but I would be here. I would be present. I would meet with the department leaders to get their take on it. I would meet with each of the council members to get, everyone has a different take. They come from a different place. They have different life experiences find out what those thoughts are. I would, coffee with the manager. There's nothing wrong with doing that, once a month or once every 2 months. Have forums. One of the things that we did, we talked about budget and engagement now that there's no town meeting. We would do a town meeting, we called it Town Meeting 101, but it was a pre-budget presentation on where we were, how things work, how the council works. Do a citizens academy. In each month or every 2 weeks have the police chief come in. This is what the police department does. This is what the fire department does. This is what conservation does. This is what MS4 is all about. So that the citizenry has an idea of how this they pay the bill. The average tax bill in East Longmeadow is about $5,800, and they pay that bill, and they have them come in, and so they know what they're getting for their money.
Thank you.
I've got the next question, Tom. And there's 5 different components of this question, and very similar to the citizen relations. It starts out with, how would you describe your overall relationship that you would envision working with the council?
It has to be frank. It needs to be respectful, always, because you folks are elected. You put your necks out on the line every 3 years, or as the case may be, and it needs to be respectful. I think it's key to, I'm going to go back again, to provide each council member the same information at the same time. Now, you're always, the town manager is always going to be accused of not doing that, okay, no matter how hard he or she tries. But you do your darndest to make sure that the council is informed that, maybe not on every personnel issue, but if there's a major blow-up, you need to be aware of it, so you're not at Starbucks or at Dunkin's and you hear it on the street. You try to be successful with that. You're probably successful 85% of the time, 75% of the time, but you try. You do, they stopped doing it. With the rural council, I used to do a Monday morning fax. That's when faxes were all the rage, just when the email was coming in, so that people would know what I was up to for the week. And in Bourne, I would do, up until the last year or so, a monthly, and it can be bi-weekly, it can be weekly, it can be whatever the council desires. It was kind of a set menu of, this is what's been going on, these are labor issues that I see coming up, these are executive sessions that I see coming up, this is a major issue happening in X. It didn't get into the day-to-day administration, it did, but it did get into, these are things that I see that are coming that you probably need to be aware of. If you have any questions, give me a call, or we can talk about it, at the next council meeting. I find the report that was provided, the written report provided in the minutes of the council meeting is very helpful. And I would try to continue that type of thing going forward. But I also think there needs to be communication between meetings. And that's what I would try to do.
Okay. You've answered with that one question. You've touched on a few of the other questions, so I won't be redundant and ask them. But I will ask, what role do you believe the town council will play in helping you do your job?
Each of the counselors, no matter who they are, and there's turnover on boards, will bring in a set of expectations and also a set of life experience and professional experience that can help the town manager do a better job. We had, at one point, I had 2 former police chiefs and a former police officer on the board. I knew a lot about public safety that year. But we the council needs to have the same set of, I think, I'll use the word mantra that I've had. Be frank. Don't, I don't want to say hide things. Don't hold things back if there's an issue or if there's a query or if you're upset about something. Don't wait for the annual review to bring that up, because that's not helpful. Bring it up at a meeting, set up a time with the manager to take care of those types of things. But I think each of the counselors bring a set of expertise that can only be beneficial. It could be what's going on in the neighborhood that you live in. Because you're all elected, I believe, at large, as I recall. Everybody's at large. So there's no precinct work or ward work. Getting to know the different neighborhoods is very important. You know, if there's a problem at one of the parks, or if there's an issue with a road, or if you're just concerned about what's happening in X department, bring it forward. There needs to be a give and take and mutual respect. That's key.
Agree.
Tom, before you ask the next question, I just want us to be mindful of the clock here. We're going to collide with the next appointment if we need to just pick our pace up a little bit.
Okay.
I'll try to be shorter, too, if that'll help.
All right.
Just pick one.
Maybe you can give us an example of a situation or scenario where you were opposed to the council and you thought that the direction that they were heading in could be detrimental to the town. Do you have an example that you could share?
Well, there was, I didn't believe that when we were looking at the override, some of the areas that the board thought should be on the chopping block were necessarily the right ones, but they are the chief policy setters. And I would try to provide them documentation as to why, as opposed to just opinion as to why. At the end of the day, whether I won or lost that battle, my job was to implement what they put forward. But there was certainly some things on the override. There were issues relative to the going back for another $1 million for the DPW, because it was running the new DPW facility. Some wanted to do that, others didn't, and we had to make the case as to why it was necessary.
Thank you.
I'm going to just jump in again and say we have 6 minutes. We need to
Mine's
have a
going to
little.
be very quick. If you're elected town manager, if we select you, what would be your first couple priorities?
My first priority would be doing some meeting with council, SEL, town attorney, as to what's out there and what the major issues are legally, if there are any. My second would be to have an immediate department leader meeting to talk to folks about how I manage, what I would expect from them, what they would expect from me, and to have I would have an open house, if you will, so that people in town could come in and just sit down and chat with me or shake hands and say hello, to show that we're going to be accessible to everyone.
Just two quick questions. First one is the combined question, then I have a follow-up question. Example of a successful project you were involved with, I mean actively involved with, and also one that didn't go quite so well, and what did you learn from that?
Okay. So a project that, excuse me, we were, that was successful was the building of the DPW facility. I was at 80% of those meetings. I had a great committee to work with at that time, and we built a beautiful facility on time, under budget. It was just one of those things that is exceptionally well done. Not so well done was a park. We were going to do the Buzzards Bay Park over. The short answer is we depended too much on a citizens group. A week after that, a month after it was built, a young child lost a toe. It had nothing to do with the park, but I shut that park down. And as it turned out, even though it was engineered with a landscape architect, there were some things that needed to be fixed. That park remained closed for a year. It was a $2.3 million investment. It's open and successful now, but I certainly would not have deferred to the degree that I did prior. And that won't happen again.
And a follow-up question, I recall this from the last time you were here. You're a resident of Vermont. You had an apartment, I believe, in Bourne, or a condo or something. And then I remember one of us asking at that last time is if you received this job because of the proximity to Vermont to here, you were comfortable commuting. Do you still hold that position?
Well, I've matured in my position this time. It would be my hope that I'm 10 minutes north of Greenfield. Okay, it's not that, it's not very far. It would be my hope that the council would consider a waiver. If the council didn't consider that waiver, then I would do what I did in Bourne. I rent a room in Middleborough, but I'd rent a room in East Longmeadow. I would do what is necessary to get the job done. But it took me 53 minutes to get here today. It's a straight shot down 91.
The last question is regarding professional development. I'll read the question, and the question states, what is it that you need in a workplace to be successful? And I'd just like to elaborate that through the last 13 questions, I believe it's already been answered. So if anyone else needs any information on that, they can pass it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So professional development, I'll give you 2 seconds. We put money aside for each of the bargaining units. We had a pool of money for professional development. I believe in sending people to national conferences where it's appropriate. I believe in doing internal professional development, peer-to-peer professional development from the administrative support staff all the way up.
Thanks, Tom.
And if I may, through the chair?
Yes.
Just go back to question 1. There's a portion of question 1 that I would like to see answered, and that has to do with how would you handle your personal and political bias when making decisions concerning our town when there are other influences like state agencies and mandates that come down that are difficult to deal with?
My personal opinions relative to my political persuasions don't matter. They can't matter. When there's a mandate that comes down, if you have to adhere to it, you have to adhere to it. Title V is an example you have to adhere to. It doesn't make sense anymore relative to water fixtures and things, but you have to do it. If the council was adamantly opposed to that, then we would take it to the MMA. We could take it to our legislative delegation, Senator Lesser and Representative Ash. Those are the types of things you could do. You could take it to the agency itself. But I don't think it's an appropriate thing not to comply when it's a mandate. You work with the mandate, and if there's things that need to be changed, you work through the appropriate channels to do that. My personal beliefs really shouldn't enter into it.
Thank you.
And so we are pretty well out of time, but to honor the integrity of the process, I will allow one question from you to the council if you have one.
What is your plan, because I think it's something that you need to look at, to increase the level of your financial reserves?
Well, I'll take a stab at this. We are awaiting our free cash to be certified. Mm-hmm. We hope that is imminent. And that would be a conversation we will need to have with our Director of Finances. In the report that she'll have to bring us, will have to be a delineation of all of the reserves,
Right.
what percentages they represent. You made a reference to our total reserves being about 9%, how that pushes up against our bond rating, our debt service. You know, we have a school coming off, and we have the prospects of a very expensive high school that could be in the pipeline
Yeah.
to come on. So, and try to balance our debt ratio.
It's just something that I think is important for towns to keep those reserves for, not huge, but things happen where you're gonna need them.
And we have a commitment to the OPEB.
Yeah.
Our balance right now is at least 9 million.
Oh, excellent.
We've
You've done
been
a good job.
aggressive.
Yeah.
You've done a very good job.
To the credit of the finance director, she's been aggressive with us in taking the opportunities when the free cash was maybe a little bit larger than a previous year to, you know, force feed that fund. As you say, it's a mandate that probably no municipality will achieve, but we have a good head start.
Good. I just wanted to also give you credit to the town and to the schools. When I look at your charter tuition out and your school choice out, there isn't a lot of it, which is a really compliment to the school system and how the town is run. So that's really something you should be proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you having me back.
For answering our questions, and good luck to you.
Thank you.